Hello again. This is Pastor Rick Bachman from the First United Church of Christ in Marshalltown, Iowa, bringing you another message on video or YouTube so that we can get through these trying times of isolation and an inability to meet in church, and hopefully bring you a little of God's Word so that it can encourage you and lift you up. Today's message is God's love, man's hate, and forgiveness. Now, this is a message I've given on several different occasions. It's a message that's especially meaningful to me because it's a lot to do with my own personal life. And so I think too often when we deal with forgiveness, we come at it with some very poor or inappropriate attitudes. And forgiveness, for me, the best analogy that I have heard, too often when we think about forgiveness, we think about it being a single act where I go, somebody's wronged me, I forgive them. Done. And the truth of the matter is, for a minor infraction, that may be sufficient. But for more serious infractions, for some of the serious things that we have dealt with in our lives and may deal with in our lives, that's not going to be enough. A single word or a single thought of forgiveness isn't going to be enough to get rid of the toxicity, that the hurt and the pain that was caused to us is there. And so the analogy I like to use is that forgiveness is often like peeling an onion. And this is not something that's unique to me. I got this from a counselor many years ago, and I love it because it is a wonderful word picture of what forgiveness truly is. For all of you who've been around an onion, you know that an onion comes in layers, and as it sits, the layers will dry and they peel off, and a new fresh layer will be exposed. And forgiveness is a little bit like that. You peel and layer one at a time. And for those who've ever peeled an onion completely, you know there's a lot of layers. And so it is with forgiveness. It can take time. It can be a long and difficult process, but it's a process that I suggest is well worth the effort. It's well worth doing because it is not for the benefit of the one who harmed you. Forgiveness is for your benefit, for you and your peace of mind. So it is that we're going to share this message today. I have several scriptures, and the first one I want to start out with is Luke 6, 37 and 38. It says, "Judge not, or you will be judged. Condemn not, or you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, and put to your lap. With the measure that you use, it will be measured back to you." And I think that is accurate not only of giving, but in forgiving. You see, forgiving your persons who've hurt you allows you to be forgiven by the Father. And we're going to explore that a little later in the message, but it is something that is tied and something that we have to be aware of, that we are in requirement by God to forgive. Mark 6, 14 and 15. Says, "For if you forgive others their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses." That's a verse that I suspect many would like to overlook. Because honestly, we don't want to hear that God is conditional in forgiveness. We cannot receive it without giving it. And I guess the best analogy I can give to you in this respect is that think of your heart as having many rooms. And one room, in fact, is forgiveness. And there's a door on that room. And if you want to open that door and let God's forgiveness in, then that door is going to have to be open so that you can forgive others. If you only want to open that door just a little peek and say, "Come on, hurry up, Jesus, get in here before this other stuff comes out," it's not going to work. The truth of that analogy is God is saying, take that door off its hinges, remove it altogether so that my forgiveness can flow in and your forgiveness can flow out. It's not an easy I grant you, nobody wants to hear this, especially those who have been hurt seriously and very harmfully over their life. But I'm here to tell you, it's going to work. Colossians 3, verses 12 through 15. Then it says, put on, then, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, bearing with one another, as it is if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other. As the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive. And above all things, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you were called in one body. Wonderful words, but again, difficult task. Because many of you have been hurt seriously and very harsh. And this is going to be, for some of you, a hard topic. And some of you are already getting uncomfortable with these words because they're prodding your heart to say, well, nah, Rick, you don't understand. I don't think I can forgive the people that have hurt me so badly. And as I usually do in a message, I try to add a little humor. The old adage that used to go that, medicine goes down with a little sugar. And sometimes if we add a little humor, we can help with some difficult lessons. And so it is, I want to bring you a couple of things. There's a Sunday school teacher that was trying to teach little kids how to be forgiven of sin. And she went through the process of going about coming to Christ, acknowledging your sin, telling him and repenting of that sin, and then you can receive forgiveness. So she's doing a recap. And she had one little boy in the back of the room who probably looked an awful lot like me when I was a little boy and thought a lot like me. And she asked this class, well, what's the first thing you have to do before you can get forgiven? And the little boy raises his hand and goes, sin? Well, he's technically correct. The truth of it is, without sin, without problems, without harm, there is no need for forgiveness. It's, however, when we do get sin, when we do harm, that there becomes a need for forgiveness. And another story is about a Spaniard warrior who fought in many battles and surprisingly got through it alive and went to a ripe old age. And as he was preparing to die in his deathbed, a priest came and was going to prepare him for that end times. And he asked the warrior, he says, son, have you forgiven all your enemies? And the warrior responded, well, Father, I have no enemies. Well, this kind of took the priest back by a little bit because he knew how many battles and how many wars this warrior had fought in, and there were quite a few. He was famous for all the battles that he had fought in. And so he kind of sat there puzzled for a moment, and the warrior, seeing that puzzled look on his face, he says, Father, I have no enemies, for I have killed them all. Some of our human nature want to be like him. I won't have any enemies once I've killed them all. Once I've eliminated all my enemies, I won't have enemies. Well, that's not an easy or right way to deal with it. And we have to look at this from a God point of view, not a man point of view. And to be honest with you, we live in a world full of hate. We live in a world full of violence. We live in a world that has unspeakable acts happening every day. And I find myself, even as a ex-cop who has, in some cases, thought he saw it all, looking and going, truthfully, can we get any worse? People are nasty. People are rotten. And honestly, we live in a world that honestly does seem to strive to see how terrible it can be, how evil it can be, how completely distraught and worldly it can destroy each other. And in that kind of situation, we all feel that anxiety and go, what is wrong with this world? What is truly the answer to all these problems? And I'm here to tell you that a great deal of it is forgiveness. You see, to take a bomb and strap it to your body and walk in and kill yourself and all these other people, you have to believe that the people you're destroying are so terrible, so beyond hope, so beyond being human, that you're willing to sacrifice your own life to take out a few. Now that's a skewed, dangerous, and crazy attitude. But in a world of not forgiveness, it becomes reasonable. It becomes logical. It becomes easy to go to. And that seems kind of, for folks that aren't in that kind of environment, maybe a little difficult to grasp. And so I want to share with you my own personal story. It's a story that is frankly gives me a little insight, because I have battled with forgiveness in my own life. I grew up in a small town with a father who battled alcoholism. He also battled violence. And so my mother, my brothers, and I all knew physical violence at a very young age. And it is hard to be subjected to that kind of environment, to that kind of fear, and then turn around and say, oh, well, I forgive. Now, I became a Christian at 17, and I was told I was to forgive him. And I dutifully said the words, yep, I forgive him. And then moved on, because I said the words. That obviously is enough. But it wasn't. And in fact, what I didn't see, but others around me could, was they started to see a young man who was very full of anxiety. He had more than his share of anger. He had more than his share of a grudge. He had an attitude. He was always right. He never, you could never question him. And in a lot of ways, this started to become destructive to people I worked with, to family, to friends, and it started to become a problem. And people who loved me confronted me and said, hey, Rick, I think you should do some counseling. Now, the interesting thing is, I'm a police officer at this time. I'm a hardcore, no emotion, do it and get it done right. I'm as tough as they come. And so when you tell me that I might need counseling, I laughed. I'm the last guy that needs counseling. This stuff doesn't bother me because I have got it handled. I am tougher than nails. There's nothing can get to me. I have got this boundary and barrier built around me. But there was also a sense that there was no peace in my life. And as I read scriptures, it says, God will give you a peace that surpasses all understanding. I saw that I didn't have that peace. It wasn't there in my life. And I could witness it in other people's lives, but I certainly wasn't seeing it in my life. So I guess reluctantly would be the best word. I decided to go see a counselor. And I love it because when I talked to her the first time, I said, so what's this going to take? 2, 3 weeks? And she just laughed. It took a long time. In fact, that was in my early 30s. I am now closing in on 64 within a month or two. I would tell you that that process still continues. I have made great strides in it, but I still will tell you that as that onion is peeled, there's occasion where I wake up with some anxiety, with some suddenly feeling uncertain, And I feel it goes back to, and I have to say, Lord, I got an onion here. Looks like it might be time to peel another layer. So it is a process. And it's a process that if you start it, you will need to allow time. You will need help. This is not something you're going to do on your own, I can assure you. You cannot say the words, I forgive, it's over, it's done, now let's forget it. It doesn't work. It never will. And the truth of the matter is, and this is the hardest part about forgiveness, is that forgiveness often means pain. Now, for many of you who have suffered intense, traumatic pain, the idea that I should suggest to you that you're forgiving someone who's caused that much pain, and that in fact will cause you more pain, is like, are you serious? Why would you want to put me through more pain? And I know I felt the same way. And again, using an analogy that perhaps all of us can understand, if you need a surgery, you're going to need pain to solve the problem. The problem is not going to go away without some additional pain. But we all know that if a surgery is required, that little bit of pain that I'm going to suffer is for a long-term benefit. And so it is with forgiveness, that you will suffer pain in the process. You will grieve again things you thought you had buried, things that you had put away. You know, I talk about the peace, and I think anyone who's had PTSD or suffered and not forgiven is very much aware of the nightmares that come with it, the flashbacks, and the types of things. Those are frequent and numerous throughout my youth and my young adulthood. I can tell you at this point in my life, it's been a long time since I've experienced one of those. That suggests to me that the healing is taking place. But the forgiveness is more than just words. It's becoming a change of heart. We live in a world full of pain, and we're trying desperately to forget it. And people are searching out things like drugs and wild lives and just anything that they can to get rid of the pain that they're feeling. And the truth of it is, these crazy people going around shooting at other people, everybody goes, why? How? How do we fix this? And the truth of it is, there are a multitude of reasons why that takes place. But I will suggest to you one answer is that these are people who have not forgiven in their own lives. They've allowed the pain and the anguish to come to such an extent that their feeling is they're justified in hurting others in somewhat the same way they've been hurt. We cannot, as a society, continue to deny the harm done against each other or the harm done to ourselves and pretend it doesn't do damage, that it doesn't do long-term and significant harm. You know, the truth of the matter is, another old saying about forgiveness is that not forgiving someone is very similar to you drinking poison yourself and then sitting back and waiting for someone else to die. It seems foolish at the suggestion of that. But in fact, it's exactly what not forgiving does. You see, many of you, especially who have been hurt severely, will argue with me and say, Rick, my perpetrator does not deserve forgiveness. They've never asked for forgiveness. And if I'm going to forgive them, they should at least ask and be repentant. And I will honestly tell you that the person who did you harm may never ask for your forgiveness. And the fallacy of forgiveness is that you forgive for their sake. Friends, you do not forgive for your perpetrator's sake. You forgive for your own. Because just like drinking that poison, you're not hurting the person who hurts you. You're hurting yourself. You're holding anxiety, fear, hatred, and all those other emotions within you by refusing to let them go. And that's destructive, it's harmful, and let's face it, it's unpleasant. And I know because I've been there. You have to do the forgiveness, not for their sake, but for your sake. There's another reason to forgive, and that's because God says we should. And that's hard because honestly, sometimes we want to look at God and say, hey, God, do you really understand how much I've suffered? And his answer would be, yes, I do. Mark 11:25 says, whatever you stand praying, forgive. If you have anything against anyone, so that your Father also who is in heaven may forgive you your trespasses. God does not ask us to forgive. He commands us to forgive. He doesn't leave it as an option. He does not accept a one word, okay, they're forgiven, I'm done, enough. It's not true forgiveness. And to be honest with you, you will not experience the relief from the PTSD, the anxiety, and all the other things. I do believe that it is essential for a Christian, and for that matter, even a non-Christian, to learn to forgive for their own well-being and for the well-being of everyone around them. I would tell you that if you go back to my 30s and talk to coworkers and people who knew me and family, they would tell you that I was not the easiest person to be around. Indeed, sometimes I could be just very difficult. And the ironic part of this is I saw none of it. Now, I always prided myself in being very intuitive about people and their emotions and their intents, and I thought that included myself. But to be real honest with you, there was a blind spot in my own life that I could not see. But if you're suffering from anxiety, from anger, from hostility towards people because of wrong done to you, then I suggest to you that there is unforgiveness in your heart. And it's an onion that you should start looking at peeling. I suspect all of you have met angry, bitter old people who live isolated from the world, and the whole world does not want anything to do with them because they've lived their lives not forgiving. They've isolated themselves from friends and family. They've become so bitter and hard to get along with that no one really wants to be near them. And again, using the analogy of the onion, these are folks that have got rotting onions in their pockets that they're unwilling to peel. Now, do you really want to be a person who grows old with rotting onions in your pocket? It doesn't sound very pleasant to me. It's not a way to live a life. It is certainly not the way God designed you to live your life. You should, and God demands that you find ways to forgive. And that doesn't come easily. It doesn't come sometimes without help. I am not ashamed to say that I have sought out counseling. I think a Christian counselor is a very good idea. Pastors, friends, people who can give you advice, who can help you through that process. Let them give you a different insight so that you can truly start that road of peeling that onion and forgiving. And I know some of you have some very heinous things that have done in your life. I honestly cannot believe the wrong that some people have done to others. I have a friend who lost his wife to murder. And the papers were a bit shocked when he came out and said, I've forgiven him. And I'll be honest, even as a Christian, I wasn't a pastor at the time, I balked at that. Like, I'm not sure I could go that far. Well, his Christian walk perhaps was a little more advanced than mine was at that moment, because he understood a very true fact. He was not forgiving the actions. He was not forgiving the outcome of what happened. What he was doing was he was taking the grief and the pain that was in his heart and giving it to God and saying, God, this is too big a burden for me to carry, and I don't want a rotten onion in my pocket. Friends, that is the way we should look at life. It's the way we should do it. If you want peace, you're going to have to let go of all that anger, all that justifiable hatred that came before you. You will hurt. By withholding forgiveness, you will hurt everyone but your culprit. Your friends, your family, yourself. Your culprit may never know that you have or have not forgiven them. You cannot be healed without taking that door off your heart and saying, God, I need to forgive. Help me with that. God is willing and desires for us to seek Him in helping forgiveness. And I'll be honest with you, it is going to be a long and difficult process. But on the positive side, when you peel that onion, I don't know about you, but I like onions. They taste good. And my favorite way of eating onions is dipping them in a little batter, doing something called onion rings. My friends, forgiveness has never tasted better. So I challenge you today, if there are things in your heart that you have not let go of, if there are wrongs in your life that you struggle with letting go and letting God help you forgive, don't take any more time. Get that onion out of your pocket, bring it before God and say, Lord, we got an onion here. Help me with this first peel. And trust me, once that first peel is started, you will find the other peels come easier. And it is well worth the sanctity of your mind and the relationships around you to do that. Have a God blessed day. Thank you.